This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From Not a Pipe Publishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing. Today's secret word is Werebear.
If I take my time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 44th episode of Writers Not Writing. We have a very special guest today. No, we don't. We've got Doug and me. Doug is waving from behind the glass there, everyone. It's just us today. It's a weird day, and I'm going to try and kind of hold that energy, keep this positive and also honest. So we'll see how this goes. But the first thing that's weird is our costume. So everybody knows we wear our, these elaborate costumes for the show for the folks who are on YouTube, and then we have to describe them for the folks who are listening to the podcast. And I got to visit with my son today. He swung by the house. He recently started at Oregon State University, which has been very cool, and also, dad experiencing empty nest syndrome a little bit. So that's been challenging for me to adjust to him being gone, but he's just down the road, and he went with some friends to the beach, and they swung by on their way home just to say hi because he's lovely. And he knows his dad misses him a lot. So I decided in his honor to wear this full-on Beavers costume, the costume of their mascot. And I think I got this, I can't remember when it was, but I got this for another show. So I've had this Beavers mascot, and I'm not wearing the headpiece, of course, because it'd be very hard for you to hear me wearing that. But here that is. Let me show you that piece. So yeah, it's quite large, and put that over here. So I've got this beaver costume, and I was messaging with Doug about what we were both going to wear. And Doug, I don't even know how to describe what you're wearing. It looks like a pink and purple flower, an iris, a giant Georgia O'Keeffe painting. I thought we were going to match, and I went with the beavers, and I am yes. The wires got crossed, and so we do not quite match today. But Doug is behind the glass; you can't see him anyway. So YouTube is not going to hide this video, hopefully. So it's a brave choice, Doug. I wouldn't wear it out places, and I don't know where you got, and I can't imagine where you got that, and it is amazing. It's beautiful in its own way. So it's a weird day. Recording on the 7th, and those of you who've seen the news, we've got a lot of horrific tragedy in the news, and yet on a personal level, it's been a great day. I can't complain. Not only did I get to see my son, but today was the Oregon Poetry Association conference, and Kate Ristow, who's an author who's been a guest on an episode which will air in the future, Kate asked me to help her kind of be staff on the Zoom room, which was very cool. I got to go to the conference and just accept invites into the Zoom room, and there wasn't a lot of tech wizardry necessary to run this Zoom conference. Luckily, not as much as the folks who had to run the Willamette Writers Conference, where they had to be shuttling people to all these different rooms. This one they managed to do in a really clever way into 2 rooms only, and so you could go to this session or that session, and so it was very manageable. And so I got to see these fantastic poets sharing and write a couple of poems as exercises during. And so any day when I write even a single poem feels productive, which is one of the wonderful things about poetry is, I can find myself saying, here's my to-do list. It's 1,000 things long. And I wrote a good poem today, and that's enough. Today was a good day. And today I wrote 3 poems. So it was a successful day in that way. And so, and then, after that conference was over, got a lot of work done on promoting Kate Ristow's new novel, Shadow and Shimmer, which is going to be coming out. And she and I are going to have a joint launch party for my new novel, You Were Warned, and her novel, the third in her trilogy, which is fantastic, and had its cover reveal today. And the cover reveal was hosted by an organization in Washington called Northwest Speculative that does a reading series out of a bookstore, and she's going to be one of their readers. And so they asked, and we had them do the cover reveal as an exclusive. So follow Northwest Speculative on Instagram, and you can see her beautiful new cover by the artist Lee Moyer. It's very cool. So all these things are good things, and then the news out of Israel and potentially what will happen in terms of repercussions in Gaza is really awful. And so I am, I'm holding those folks. I'm very. I just, it's one of those unimaginables, and yet I try to think about the horrors, because exercising our empathy muscles shouldn't be easy. If we tried harder to imagine the horror that families are facing after an attack like that, I think we would create a world where we would see less of those horrors. So I am trying to think about those families and their losses, and the fear that those families are feeling because of the children that have been kidnapped. It's very, very scary. So holding all those things in tension has been tricky, and I don't want to bring you down, and you are watching this, of course, a few days later, and have maybe had more time to process, and I'm sure have seen people taking stands on all the hot takes on all the social media, much of which will be deeply regrettable to those people in the near future. There will be deleted tweets as a consequence of this, because this is a horror, and people feel immediately like they need to say, but what about every other horror, or this horror is justifiable in some way, or whatever, and they will regret those things. There's nothing about this that is justifiable, and nothing about this that needs any kind of whataboutism, and yet everything we say about it will be probably too much, and I'm sure I have said too much. So that is that's I should move on from the day's news, but there were a couple of things that I wanted to bring to this show to think about and bring you as the audience in on. One is, not sure which to start with. Well, I had this idea, and I'm just going to put it out there and run it by you. And Doug, you and I have talked about this. Doug thinks this is just the dumbest idea. He's laughing at me right now. He just thinks this is idiotic. But I think it's kind of funny. So hear me out, and just hear me out. So I was listening to some coverage of and kind of speculation about the Republican primary. And, if you've been paying attention to the absolute catastrophe that is the Republican Party over the last few weeks between their primary of candidates who don't really want to win and their inability to have a Speaker of the House, the constant through line in both situations is nobody wants to say, we disagree with Donald Trump about anything, and yet the guy's incoherent. And so how do you always make sure you are pledging fealty to somebody when you don't know the next, wacky thing he's going to say? And so they're all, falling all over themselves because you can't be a leader in a cult like that. There is only one leader, and everybody else needs to bow down. And so this got me thinking, because I try to empathize and show respect and figure out where people are coming from and offer them the benefit of the doubt. And that has been very difficult when it comes to people siding with, a fascist movement in my own country. And I'm not, making light of that, making a joke of that. I was listening to, I can't remember the young woman's name who testified at the January 6th. She was on Pod Save America. And she was explaining, I should pull up her name, but she was explaining how she got into Trump world and the Trump orbit, which is something that I've wondered a lot about. I do not believe that people are, mustache twirling villains. I don't think even people who do really, really awful things and have really atrocious beliefs sit around thinking I am evil, right? That is not the way human beings work. They all think they are doing the right thing. They all think they are responding properly. We justify these things to ourselves. And so, I've thought about how do people that I once held in high esteem justify some of the things, and I think there's a good measure of the things that I believe have occurred, they simply don't believe have occurred. And misinformation makes a lot of things palatable. And I'm sure they would say that the things I believe have occurred over the last during the Trump administration are simply incorrect. And so if we can't even start from a shared understanding of what is going on, that makes it very difficult. But during the run up, during the rise of Trump, I watched as people, justified behavior that they never would have tolerated, that they still wouldn't tolerate in anyone but him. In fact, if he decried his own behavior in anyone else, they would say, yes, that person's terrible. So there's something personality-wise there. And I was listening to this former aide, and she was talking about how what really got her was going to a Trump rally and not being overwhelmed by what he was saying, but by looking around at the people around her and saying, oh, these are my people. And yes, there is some measure of, blindness, which she fully acknowledges now, that there was certainly a racial element and a religious element, and not recognizing in the moment, oh, I'm saying that because the people around me are white and Christian. And, but, she looked around at the people around her, saw them admiring him, and said, oh, if my people are admiring him, then I should too. And I think that there's a lot of that is happening. But I think that the values that they were looking for were things that they'd been primed to look for. Anyway, this is all a long way of, getting at this idea I had that is very silly. Maybe. So consider. So I was thinking, and I told Doug about this. What if I announced I was running for president in the Republican Party, in the Republican primary? Now, of course, not realistic, not going to happen. But just as a thought exercise, consider. So, lefty Democrat, right? There's no way. Or is there? Stop and think about it. I could run as somebody who is opposed to the Republican institutionalists, the elites of the Republican Party. And that's a winning platform in the Republican Party right now. Running against the Republicans wins. That's one of the things they really liked about Trump. So I've got a long history of being very critical of the Republican elites. Okay, I got that one. Check. And one of the things that people admired about Trump was this idea that he was this successful business person. Now, the people who have looked at it more objectively in terms of evaluating who is a successful business person have noted that if he took the money that he was loaned by his father and put it in a mutual fund and sat on a beach sipping Mai Tais, he would be wealthier than he is now. He has not been a successful business person. He's been a failure who had a huge head start on everyone else. And in fact, we don't know how much money he has or does not have, and even he will not tell us how much money he has or does not have. He will lie about it, but he lies both to devalue and to inflate, depending on the circumstances, so that he can get more loans by inflating the values and then can pay lower taxes by deflating the values. Not having a whole lot of touch with honesty makes it very difficult for anyone to evaluate how much money he actually has. What we do know is that he benefited greatly from being in office, because beforehand he had far less than he pretended to have. Conversely, I am not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but I own a small business. I own a publishing company, which some years makes, in the four figures. So I didn't start off with anybody handing me millions of dollars, and I've run a business which is objectively successful, moderately, sometimes slightly successful, in the black. And so maybe the Republican primary voters would appreciate that. I know that my activism seems on the surface like it would be something that Republican primary voters would, I'm sure some other candidate would say, here pictures of him, at a Black Lives Matter protest. Here he is with a Black Lives Matter sign. This person cannot possibly be trusted. But here's another area where I think the Republican primary candidates misinterpret their own party. I don't believe that most of the Republican voters are conscious white supremacists. I genuinely don't. I don't think they think of themselves in that way. And in fact, I think if somebody stood up and said, look, you can vote for me and it makes you not racist, that would be really appealing to a lot of Republicans who have felt like us lefties make them feel bad, right? I could talk very honestly about the fact that I think that all people living in the United States live within a white supremacist culture, and we all participate in that, and we have all all white people have benefited from that, and that would not be a popular take. But if the spin was this is not conscious racial animus, in many cases, these people are not conscious racists. They are people who are resentful of the implication that they are conscious racists. And I understand that. I also do think they support policies which are explicitly and dangerously racist and preserving of a white supremacist status quo. But those policies are not things that they voted for particularly. They didn't think about the policies. It wasn't about policy. I really believe that. I don't think most Republicans cared much about what Donald Trump would actually do. It was about teams. And so I could run and talk about how I don't believe Republicans are conscious racists. Maybe that would appeal. But I think the biggest thing that I could offer, which I think Republicans would love, is I could stand up there on that stage and point out that all the other candidates are cowards. I don't understand why these candidates aren't pointing that out clearly. They're failing to recognize that they are trying to win the top position in an authoritarian party. It's acting tough. Acting tough. Fake tough. Fake tough. It's not like Donald Trump is actually tough, but kowtowing to fake tough, being the toady who stands behind the bully and laughs at his jokes. Nobody who thinks the bully is scary is going to admire the laughing toady more than the bully, right? Somebody needs to say, hey, everyone on this stage, you're all cowards. And I can honestly say I've never liked Donald Trump, and I'm actually trying to win. And none of you can say that. And there, I believe, is an element within the Republican electorate that would say, that's the kind of punch him in the nose, actual courage that is absent in every other level of the Republican leadership. They are all so busy saying, we will do whatever Trump says. None of them can say Trump is wrong. Well, you can't replace the wannabe tough guy through cowardice. So this is my idea, is, here's the other thing. I would be open and honest about how this is a performance art exercise. And again, I think, people think at first blush, you'd go, that's crazy. Nobody's going to vote for a candidate who is being honest about the fact that he's not taking the candidacy seriously. And then I'm like, but wait, stop. Consider what we have seen over the last, 6 years. Donald Trump has never been serious. And that was part of the appeal. I heard people say to me, I like it because he tells it like it is, which did not mean he told the truth. And if you really pressed them, they understood. On some level, they knew he was not a truth teller. He tells it like it is meant he was performing honesty in this way that the other candidates were not performing honesty. They were trying to couch things in these careful ways to say the right thing. And he wasn't even trying to say the right thing. He was willing to say the wrong thing brazenly. And they liked that. They liked the person who would lie without caution. And I can be incautious. Absolutely. I can stand up and say, this is an act. And guess what? You like a reality TV star, right? I can act the part better than any of these candidates here who are trying to say the right thing. I'll say the wrong thing. I'll stand up here and say the wrong thing. So if there is some big money Democratic donor who wants a patsy who is willing to make a fool of himself and deal with all of the hatred that would come from it, I would love an opportunity to go knock on doors in Iowa and say, hello, my name is Benjamin Gorman. I am running for the Republican primary. I don't take this seriously at all. But then if you like Donald Trump, you don't either. So we have a lot in common. And I think that could be a shit ton of fun. So if anybody out there wants a spoiler, who would just stand up and say, all of these other Republican candidates are jokes. Your primary candidate is absolutely absurd. And voting for somebody that absurd is the equivalent of voting for somebody as unqualified as I am. Oh, that's the other thing. I have no experience in political office. And Neither did Donald Trump, and that appealed. So elect me. I'm just as unqualified. I am the blue collar version of a successful business person. I have no qualms about saying the wrong thing. And I will tell you that I recognize that you are not conscious of how much harm you are causing by supporting Donald Trump. And I'll make you feel better about the fact that you did a really, really awful thing by voting for this terrible man. And you can fix it by not voting for that awful man the second time. And then come, the general, I would absolutely toss to people who are more qualified than I am, because it's not just a candidate we are voting for, it's a whole apparatus. And I think people don't understand that. You're choosing everyone, not the person. And we know that choosing a whole staff of people who, at this point, their only qualification will be their fealty to Donald Trump is a terrible way to run any kind of organization. So if you've got millions and millions of dollars and you just want to, cause a little chaos in the Republican primary, Benjamin Gorman for Republican candidate for for president, only insofar as I could point out how absolutely absurd it is that this person is still even being taken seriously by half of the electorate. So, Doug, what do you think? Yeah, he's still shaking his head. He's still like, no, don't even play around with that. It's a ridiculous idea. Yes, it's a ridiculous idea. Our politics are ridiculous at this point. They are absurd. This is so stupid that we are even at this place. So part of me is like, hey, lean into it, and I mean, this is, yeah. Run a lefty who hates the Republican establishment just as much as Donald Trump does. I can do that. I can be that guy. Okay, dumb idea, but maybe call me. Okay, so here's my other thing that I've been thinking about, and this I need your help, listeners and viewers. I think that some folks missed something important about Doug. And Doug, this is my fault. I have not been clear about this with the viewers about you for quite some time. But I mentioned in the pilot episode, if you've been listening since then, that Doug is entirely fictional. There is no Doug. And I was thinking this last week that it would be really convenient if I had a publicist, essentially a publicist for the company, because this is one of those things that writers really benefit from, is having somebody who can, set up those interviews, reach out to the press, do those things. But one of the challenges that I have faced is that Not Applied Publishing has had a couple of co-publishers during its history who are no longer with the company, wishing those folks well. Vivica Sheeran, most recent co-publisher, went on to bigger and better things with a publishing company that's been around for like 100 years instead of 13 years. So keep an eye out for her. She's going to be doing great things. But that meant it's now back to just being me. And so the challenge that poses when I am both the publisher and one of the authors who's published by the company is that I can reach out to, the media and that kind of thing about Kate Ristow, about M.K. Martin, about Karen Eisenbray, about, these other Kurt Clopton, they're a super guy behind me. I can reach out and say, you should have this person on your show. They are, this incredible writer, and they've got this excellent book, and you should be reviewing it, and that kind of thing. It's harder when I'm saying, oh, and then there's this other author, and he's me, right? And I can just imagine when they see my name on the signature line at the bottom of a press release or whatever, they're going, really, how many books has this publishing company published? Is it just this guy? It's not. We've got amazing other authors. I'm just one of them. So it was really helpful. It was handy when there were, more than one of us doing this work, somebody else could be saying, oh, okay, and also, by the way, our publisher's got some books too. So I was thinking it might be really nice if Doug the producer could fill that role. And the challenge is that Doug the producer doesn't have a last name. And so right now I couldn't even sign an email from Doug the producer. And so I need Doug's character to be more fully fleshed out. Doug, do you see? Doug doesn't even have an insight into what his last name should be. So I need some folks to reach out, to email, to post in the comments on the links to this show. What do you think Doug's last name should be? Now, some conditions. So I don't think it should be so common a name that somebody goes, Doug Smith. Nothing wrong with Smith. I know some very nice people whose last name is Smith. Wonderful people. Common last name, right? So if we're going to really have this character who is the publicist for Not a Pipe Publishing, it needs to be a name that is common enough that it's believable and doesn't seem like we're trying too hard to make it sound exotic, and at the same time that it is that it's not too common. Also, it should be a name that kind of commands a little bit of authority, right? Where people are saying, as soon as I saw the name of Doug, whatever, I just knew I could trust that guy. That Doug he tells it like it is, just as much as Donald Trump does. Only Doug is more honest. Doug is not a compulsive liar. A fictional character can be far more honest than some people. And so I need your help on this. What should be Doug's last name? So please write in, give me some ideas. What do you think? And I ask guests on the show what they think their D&D character would be if they were a character on Dungeons and Dragons. And so I wanted to ask Doug because I thought that might help us figure out not a fantasy last name, right? The name again needs to be, he can't be Elvin Swiftfoot like as his last name, right? But getting to know his personality might help us figure out what would be the appropriate name. And Doug, I don't think we've had anybody else who has this character, but Doug is I think Doug would be a dwarf. We've had some dwarves, but Doug would be a dwarf cleric, probably, maybe druid, because Doug needs to carry this gravitas to say, this is the book you should take seriously, right? And so dwarves are like hardy, and then as a druid he can turn into a bear, a werebear, and that is really beneficial when sending out press releases. Again, it's almost as counterintuitive as me running in the Republican primary, but if you get an email from someone and you have that sense, that sixth sense that at any moment that person could turn into a gigantic bear, not only will you open that email, but you may even reply. And that's the kind of gravitas that we want Doug to have. So again, what should be the name for Doug, our dwarven druid werebear character? And Doug, you can feel free to weigh in on this yourself, but I mean, he's really stumbling, and every time I look over beyond the glass at him in that costume, it is disturbing. So ignore the fact that he wore that particular costume to this show, and what is the name that you think he should have as a successful publicist and not as a walking Georgia O'Keeffe painting? So normally I would also ask the guest what they've been daydreaming about, and I shared some of my ridiculous daydreams. And of course, Doug. Yeah, so Doug's daydreams are actually really interesting to contemplate, right? So if I was thinking about this today. My dog was laying out in the sun. My dog exists, by the way. And Evie was laying out in this last warm day, and I projected onto her that she was feeling such joy laying there in the sun, because that I know historically that is something she has enjoyed so much. But I also know she's been struggling with some arthritis lately, and we have to give her some meds now, and that is kind of heartbreaking. And so then I was second guessing myself, and I was thinking, I think that this dog absorbing the sunlight and reveling in this last little bit of warmth that we're having in the fall before the winter cold creeps into her joints. I presume she's so happy, right? But maybe she's not. And so what is that? What is the joy that is going on that I can't actually perceive, right? What are the dreams, the daydreams that I project rather than the dreams that I can actually be aware of? And I think that Doug's dreams are like a dog's dreams, in that I don't know what they are, and I'm plugging them into his head. And that's one of the joys of writing fiction, is it is sometimes merely convenient to give a character a personality that is conducive to the plot, right? What is it that this character needs to be motivated by in order to move the story forward? But sometimes you end up with a character who dreams things that are not merely convenient. They might be idiosyncratic. They might help us identify with that character in this deeper way. And so think about what Doug daydreams about. The daydreams of Doug are going to help us figure out who should be this person who should be sending out press releases, not merely in a utilitarian way, right? Not just because that's going to help Doug, successfully, schedule interviews for our authors, but because it makes Doug more of a three-dimensional character. What does Doug daydream about? Consider that in this next week. While you're considering that, put in your calendar the October 28th launch party for my next book. And if you attend, I will make sure to introduce you to Doug, which, if Doug is the big draw at this point, I would be fine with that. I would just enjoy having people at that party at the Rose City Book Pub. If you live too far away and you can't attend, totally understand. But I can have Doug give you a shout out. And we've even posted some coloring pages so that kids of all ages who show up to the party will have coloring pages to color in. We're going to do a fun thing. I'm excited about this, where we take a couple pages from Kate's book and a couple pages from my book, and then I turn them into Mad Libs, and the crowd gets to rewrite those pages for us. I think that'll be fun. So it's going to be a very fun party. So consider coming to that. I better take a little break and let our show be sponsored, or let you learn about our sponsor of our show, Marc Janessen, who wrote November Reconsidered. And I wish I had my copy of it in hand. I realized it's in my classroom, because this is a book that is so good that it's one of the books that I make available to my students as they are learning about free verse poetry and what it can do, and the way that a book of free verse can be organized thematically. So check out Marc Janessen's November Reconsidered, and we'll come back in just a moment. Thanks.
This week's Writers Not Writing is brought to you by November Reconsidered by Marc Janessen. November Reconsidered is, what else? A book. A poetic journey through the month at the leading edge of winter. Part autobiography, part exploration, and about 100 other things. Find November Reconsidered via Amazon or wherever books are ordered. read November Reconsidered. It will change your life, hopefully for the better.
And if you'll permit me a little log rolling, the sequel to my novel Don't Read This Book comes out on October 17th. The second in the Convention of Fiends series is titled You Were Warned. Book 2 will hit bookstore shelves on October 17th from Not a Pipe Publishing. It tells the story of the return of Magdalena Wallace. The world's greatest writer survived the novel designed to kill readers, and now she needs to save humanity, and all the monsters too. In addition to her delightful non-binary golem friend, the compulsively foul-mouthed king of trolls, and the fan-favorite lesbian vampire, this adventure has baby werewolves. Maybe a dragon? Certainly a lot of social commentary and existential dread, a moderate amount of dismemberments and exsanguinations, and jokes. I love these kind blurbs from writers I respect so much. Be warned, this book is packed with monsters, comedy, action, romance, and adorable werewolf pups, writes Karen Eisenbray, author of Ego and Endurance, the Daughter of Magic series, and the Saint Rage duology. It's action-packed, filled with fantastic creatures, hilarious and sharp. We meet so many characters and return to an awesome one who is at the intersection of identities and honestly an inspiration, writes Zaji Cox, author of Plums for Months, Memories of a Wonder-Filled Neurodivergent Childhood, and Benjamin Gorman is at least 3 goblins in a trench coat. There is no other logical explanation, writes Maren Anderson, author of Sparks, who is at least 3 winged unicorns in an off-the-shoulder A-line dress. There'll be a joint launch party for You Were Warned and Kate Ristow's Shadow and Shimmer, the third in her Shadow Girls saga, at Rose City Book Pub on Saturday, October 28th from 3 to 5. That's at 1329 Northeast Fremont Street in Portland. Costumes are encouraged, so dress up as your favorite monster or mythical creature, or just dress as a human ready to teleport into the universe of a great book. The whole family is welcome, and the book pub offers wonderful food and beverages. There will be games, prizes, and an opportunity to get your copies of your book signed. I would love to see you there in person on October 28th. Welcome back. So, this doesn't count as my personal daydream, but another little anecdote about the day's events. Funny thing happened during the Oregon Poetry Association conference itself. One of the first sessions I went to was by Dale Chaplin, and she was doing a session on writing erotic poetry. Now, people who've read my books know this is not in my wheelhouse. I don't write erotica. My poetry, I don't write erotic poetry. It's not something that I am, generally comfortable with. I tell my students, when I get to a sex scene, the camera pans to the fireplace, right? Trying to, improve in that area. All writers are, we should all be working on our craft, but that's something that I it's not my normal bag, but because I was staffing this particular Zoom room, there I was, right? And it actually ended up being a really wonderful class, and the materials were really, really cool. The examples were great, and I came away thinking I should be trying to write erotic poetry, or at least, imbuing more of my work with that kind of energy, and so that was all well and good, but this was the best part. At the end of the session, we each shared out our poem, and we got to this one particular poet, and I didn't catch her name, but she shared that the reason her poem was not quite as complete as the rest of ours was that during the writing time, she was interrupted by a knock at the door by a pair of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, I don't want to disrespect anyone's particular perspective on the world and what that they feel called to do. And if somebody feels called to go door to door to convert people to their religious faith, I certainly can't look down on that if I'm knocking on their door and encouraging them to, vote this way or that way on some state measure or whatever. So, we evangelize for what we evangelize for, I suppose. But I cannot stop giggling to myself about the notion that these Jehovah's Witnesses interrupted the writing of a poem I can only presume would have made them so deeply uncomfortable. And it just makes me imagine, what if she decided to share what she was doing with them? That might be a remarkably effective way to deter certain kinds of evangelism at your door. Wouldn't stop me from saying, I think you should vote, this way on measure this number, right? That's great. And I got to hear your lovely poem. But I think some folks might have found that really shocking. So, that's what, there's a whole story in my mind of the experience of the person who is writing erotic poetry, or who knows what. I mean, we could dial that up if we were turning it into a story. They're perhaps filming and are interrupted by Jehovah's Witnesses. The kind of performance could be lots of different art forms, but any kind of erotic art that was being created in that context, I think would be really fun. In fact, poetry was probably easier for her to hide than other art forms might have been, but, I still am just getting a kick out of that. So, yes, greeting the Jehovah's Witnesses at the door with your erotic poetry. Something I want you to consider for this next week. Try it out if you get that magical opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Of course, I need to thank Max Oakland, who provided his intro song, or our intro song. I prefer the dusk. You can let him know you like it at Max Oakland with 3 Ds on Twitter. Thanks to Halizna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band, you've got a song, you'd like to get it out there a little more, and we can help, feel free to email me about that. Thanks, as always, to Doug, the producer, for being here, for putting this whole show together, for the other extra work that he is volunteering to do for the company. And again, if you have any insight into what his last name should be, I'd really love to hear your thoughts about how Doug can be a more complete person. I'm sorry, Doug, that sounded mean. A complete person, that sounds really dehumanizing. I don't mean it in that way. I mean, how can we give you more attributes so that you can be, more successful in some other venues, which is not to disparage all that you've done for this show. Thank you so much for your work here. Please engage on social media with the show. Let us know what you think Doug's last name should be, and any other characteristics of Doug that you think would be helpful. We'll make him a more complete person. I said it again. Gosh, sorry, Doug. I'm not implying that you are incomplete. I am that you don't have some of these external labels that society demands of us. Doug the producer is a fine name. We just need a little more. So viewers, give me a hand there. And viewers, listeners, as always, our lives need spaces in the same way that a book needs spaces. So take the space you need, and no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.